A lot of leaders, unfortunately, they don't have confidence in themselves, and they end up changing the strategy too frequently. A second type of leaders, they don't change the strategy, but what they change is key members of the team. They get extra time by basically saying, well, I got the wrong person here and there. And there's a third type of leaders, those that kind of roll up their sleeves and having the confidence that the strategy is the right one. The team fundamentally is the same. It might not be perfect, but they're willing to roll up their sleeves and build the capabilities together and go through whatever it takes to learn every day and continue to encourage and inspire the teams to go faster.
Welcome to Building Better CMOs, a podcast about how marketers can get smarter and stronger. I am Greg Stuart, the CEO of the nonprofit MMA Global. And that voice you heard at the top is Manolo Arroyo, EVP and Global Chief Marketing Officer at the Coca-Cola Company. He's been the CMO since 2020, but before that, he led business units for Coke in Spain, Southeast Asia, Mexico, and more. Today on the podcast, Manolo and I are going to talk about why great leaders never use fear as a weapon, the one metric that informs all of Coke's decisions, and why you have to be selfish to be a top performer, and much more. Now, this podcast is all about the challenges that marketers face and unlocking the true power that marketing can have. Manolo is going to tell us how he did that right after this.
This episode is brought to you by Merrill. Join one of the most iconic names in wealth management, Merrill. You'll be part of a dynamic team of advisors and specialists working hard every day to grow their clients' wealth. And with the support of best-in-class research, advanced digital tools, and the resources of a global institution, it's truly an opportunity you can be bullish about. Learn more at careers.bankofamerica.com. Copyright 2024, Bank of America Corporation.
So Manolo, I couldn't be more excited to have you here for Building Better CMOs today. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here.
You're a big international guy, but you're in Atlanta actually today at
I'm
headquarters.
Today in Atlanta.
Right?
I try to be here as much time as I can, but been around for the last few weeks. And I'll be around for the next couple of weeks as well. So all good.
And then back to the road.
Correct.
So listen, I'm not sure exactly when we're going to broadcast here, but this podcast is just a little bit post the Olympics. I think it's been a couple of weeks at this point, but Coke has been a sponsor or supporter partner of the Olympics almost 100 years, 96 years?
That is correct.
That's crazy commitment.
Yeah. Next 2028 Olympics will be our century of partnership with the Olympic Committee, which is going to be a very special, obviously for us, a very special moment and a big celebration, particularly also given the fact that it's going to take place here in the US.
That's real longevity. I mean, I think marketing sometimes loses the appreciation of long-term partnerships, I think. I don't know. It feels like the world's changed a little bit. But what does the Olympics do for Coke? Why is that so important to continue that relationship?
Obviously, it's not the only one, but it's probably the biggest global party around sports, around athletes, around celebration of effort, hard work, sacrifice.
Yeah.
Where regardless of your nationality, your race, your religion, your language, we all come together. The fit with what the brand stands for today and what we've always wanted to stand for, it's very, very natural. We share very common values as a brand, as a company, and as an Olympic movement. Mm-hmm. So it is a natural platform for our brand.
Yeah, and who doesn't remember the Hilltop singing ad of Coca-Cola? I mean, I'm really dating myself. When is that? I'm going to say like 20 years, but I bet you it's probably 30, maybe more years old.
Exactly. That's another expression in the same territory, in the same space.
I hadn't really thought of that, but does Coke really see, I mean, we're in a funny time in America, of which you and I are not going to talk about. Is Coke really always seeing itself as sort of really trying to bring the world together? That really is part of the brand essence, isn't it?
Correct. I mean, if you think about the brand obviously has more than just one meaning. It has multiple meanings that are multiple various pillars, which is also different versus some of our other brands in the portfolio that are basically one fundamental meaning. But Coke has multiple various. One of the most, if not the most important, has been its ability to bring people together regardless of where they come from. And that is anchor in a reality. And the reality is that you can find, no matter where you are around the world, more than 200 countries today around the world, you can find a Coke. And it's always going to be exactly the same Coke.
Yeah.
You can't buy a better Coke than someone else. It's going to be exactly the same product for everyone. It's extremely inclusive. You can't discriminate one or the other. It's exactly the same Coke for everyone. And that is part of what anchors that a lot of times people that have very different backgrounds, very different, suddenly they see themselves sharing with someone completely different one thing in common. And that unites people. That actually unites people. The product itself, when you really think about it, I won't get into the secret formula because that, as you know, is...
Oh, come on. I thought we promised to release it today. No.
But the product itself has very different, actually, at some point even contrarian taste profiles that are brought together, creating a new, different, indescribable. It's a taste that doesn't have a memory. It doesn't have any specific memory, but you will never forget how Coca-Cola tastes. There's nothing like it. You can't say it tastes this or that. It tastes Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
And that is also something that we see resonating for decades all over the world, regardless of where you are.
Yeah. I was just in Argentina last week. I drank Coke Zero the whole time I was there. I drink Coke Zero. I'm a huge Coke Zero fan. I think it's the best drink that was ever created. My only stumbling block, and listen, I'm not here to make a pitch for you changing your business. I can't get enough of it in the house to wait for me there. It's complicated given I think it's a heavy liquid. So I don't know. One of these days, I looked into a freestyle machine, but I think they're like $20,000 each, right? That's probably a little silly for me, right?
Correct. I mean, it is a machine that makes sense. It's equipment that makes sense for commercial, for our clients, for our customers.
Yeah.
By the way, the quality in freestyle is just phenomenal. The taste delivery is just phenomenal. It's very impressive.
Still get the formulas just as good, dare I say, just as good as a bottler probably could within its individual, and so many more options, right?
Absolutely. You can mix and match however you want it within the multiple choices that you have in the freestyle machine.
Not to get too much credit, we've actually talked a lot about this in the work that we've done with Dr. Omar Rodriguez and Coca-Cola. I mean, he was a god. I've walked through the halls of Coca-Cola with Omar, and I'm not sure if this is an appropriate reference, but it's a little like Jesus on Palm Sunday when you're walking with Omar. Everybody comes out to kind of see him. But we've talked a lot about what the power of those machines were in providing data back to the company about current consumer taste and trends. I mean, I thought it was a personalization product effort, but I'm sure it does that too. But it really is about that feedback loop, which is so many companies don't have that, especially for consumer packaged goods, have difficulty getting feedback, right? It's amazing.
Correct. I mean, definitely is one of the earlier initiatives in terms of helping us access to first-party data and understanding much better consumer behavior around experiencing and tasting our products.
Yeah, very exciting. It'd be interesting. I mean, I'm sure that's a closely guarded secret like the formula itself, but it'd be interesting to understand sort of those trends and sort of what's happening. Hey, one more thing just here, I think I noticed online that I thought would be interesting. So you have a platform, I think it's the brand platform, and then I think it's also for AI, if I understand right, this Real Magic. Can you differentiate those and just talk about what Coke's doing there? It kind of caught my attention. What is Real Magic platform? The
Real Magic is the platform that we are currently activating since 2021 for brand Coca-Cola. And it's grounded on the insight that today, what humans are looking for, particularly Gen Z, is special connections, special moments of sharing. And a lot of times, out of the unexpected, in a completely almost improvised way, with the right stimuli, obviously what we're intending to be is with the right experience of a Coke, you can generate an extraordinary outcome whereby humans connect better, share better, and live better. And that's basically the fundamental premise that is going behind Real Magic. Now, that gets translated in different environments around consumption occasions, channels, passion points, where it might be from music to football to sports to enjoying food. So that's basically the platform that we've been using for, we're still using and planning to do that for brand Coca-Cola moving forward. Now, on AI, what we've done is we've took that platform to basically very early last year, 23, actually OpenAI through Bain Consulting, which is a company that we know well and we work regularly with them. They introduced us to OpenAI, and OpenAI was very interested to explore the potential applications of their technology, specifically in the world of branding, marketing within CPG, and that's why we got a partnership in place. And that was basically the very early stages whereby we brought together the power of GPT, more than chat, it was actually the GPT technology, with DALL-E. So combining text, language, and images. And we launched an initiative whereby we invited consumers around the world to create unique designs for brand Coca-Cola. We did that in a controlled way, in a sandbox, whereby we could learn about the technology, how did it work, what was the potential, the possibilities, and very early on, and we were basically literally blown away by the success and the adoption that it had in just record time, literally in a few days. But we, very early on, we saw the possibilities that that technology could bring to our business in terms of moving to a whole different dimension when it comes to both effectiveness, speed, and also efficiency. Particularly around the speed. I mean, think about, for example, a business like ours, on brand Coca-Cola. We sell our products literally every week to more than 30 million outlets around the world.
30 million outlets, actual like stores, distribution points. Yeah, connection to consumers. Yeah, wow.
Outlets,
crazy.
Stores, distribution, connection points. And pretty much every one of those outlets has at least one, if not more, point of sale materials. Those point of sale materials get produced around the world through an ecosystem of actually thousands of agencies. So how do you bring the power of technology in a way that you can ensure that you optimize content, messaging, and more importantly, speed in the last corner of the planet in a way that is consistent? And how do you do that also in a way that you invite the power of diversity, the power of different people creating very unimaginable content that has not followed the regular process of briefing a traditional agency? So we're in the process of obviously doing that. We have multiple applications already in place. And there's a lot of exciting stuff that this technology is going to bring for us under this platform. We extended that platform after that initial experiment in March 23 to create Real Magic 2.0. That was part of our Christmas campaign. So developing your own Christmas card, leveraging some of our marketing assets from polar bears to obviously Santa, contour bottle, our logos, et cetera, And again, we saw the same. Millions and millions of consumers coming up with amazing creativity.
And listen, what's funny too, I mean, I don't know how many people remember Matt, but you guys have been very big on personalization. Again, to the degree a company like yours with broad distribution doesn't always know the end consumer, doesn't touch them per se, but you put names on cans. I mean, when was that? 2010, 2011 you started doing that? That was a crazy sort of thing to do.
Well, I also took a small part in that process that actually started in Australia.
Oh. Were you in APAC at that point?
I was in APAC. I was actually based in Bangkok, but I happened to be back then the, let's call it the executive coach of the marketeer that started the journey in Australia. And she was struggling to get her CMO approving that idea because the idea seemed like out of any governance model. It was really not well received initially.
Yeah.
So it was a fascinating process to get that individual be willing to bet on the idea. And then from there, everything else is history. Went global, big. To me, it was a no-brainer.
Why'd you like the idea? I mean, maybe it's obvious, but just, what was your reaction?
To me, when I saw it, is we got to do this like tomorrow.
Oh, really? Okay.
Like tomorrow. And let me tell you why. When brands get as big, as iconic, as international as Coca-Cola, it becomes almost something like extremely aspirational to a lot of people, but at the same time, almost not that accessible to change and be part of it. But what is more personal and more connected to your own brand than your own name as a brand, the word Coca-Cola. So for a company like Coca-Cola to remove from the graphics the logo and put the name of an individual, there's nothing that defines us better. I mean, if I ask you what's your name, or you ask me, I mean, the first thing you want to know about any individual is your name.
Everybody loves to hear their own name, right?
So there's nothing more personal and more customized. It might be, I mean, my name might be, I don't know, 8 or 9% of the population of my country.
Yeah.
But it still is my name, it's mine. So that's why, to me, making it Coke much more personal, intimate, have more local, not only local, but personal intimacy. It was the clear hook that was going to drive tremendous success. And I still remember, back then, the president of Asia Pacific, in the moment in which, this CMO was presenting the idea that was expecting potentially everyone pushing back, and it's not a good idea. I still remember the whole room went quiet. And the president of Asia Pacific back then looked to the side to myself, which he knew I was not in a marketing role, but he knew I was coming from a marketing background. And said, Manolo, what do you think? It's like, how many more seconds you need to decide this? It's a no-brainer. Just,
oh my God.
Just go. And then he went global. It was hard from all the logistics, manufacturing, details and implications at the beginning. It was even at times difficult to overcome, but I think we did it. We have incredible people at Coke, very smart, very capable across all functions, and they are the ones that made it happen.
But it's very easy for people to kind of say, no, it's funny. I tell my team here all the time, I say, first, what's the right answer? Like, what's truth? What's fact? What's best? Start there. Then ask, can we make it happen? You have to figure out what's the right thing to do. Because when you go, can we do it first? I'm telling you, every good idea dies. Don't ever get caught up in how hard anything is, because you'll never do anything. You got to start with, is it a powerful idea? And then let's go. Oh my God, I love that you backed that there. And that's great.
No, it's I mean, this is actually the first time I tell this story.
What a great moment.
But that individual, the person that was driving that, I still remember, we had good conversations trying to resolve the conundrum of how to get this idea through the organization.
It's kind of crazy that somebody even would come up with the idea, because it would be very hard not to, even myself, it'd be hard to go, oh man, you can't make that. You can't do that. That's just nuts. Like, well, that's a good idea. I don't know. I could hear the internal dialogue and trying to get there.
Actually, the idea came from an agency, actually not one agency, 2 agencies.
Oh, really?
The same day came with the idea. Not exactly, but kind of very similar. So
okay.
It was actually 2 external agencies that brought that idea.
I love it. Okay. Here's a good question for you. We'd like to sort of discuss. What is the best advice you've ever been given? I mean, it could be kind of personal advice to you as an executive. It could be sort of in a business context. But as you look back over your career, what has somebody said to you go, well, wow, boy, that just changed everything for me. That really shifted, or was the most illuminating thing somebody had ever said to me? What do you think that is?
I've been very fortunate to work for phenomenal leaders, people that I've learned a lot, and they have guided me, have advised me. So it's kind of hard to choose.
Coke is a great company. Yeah, John Trimble. I mean, I know the marketing team for decades now. They're the best of the best. Jonathan Mendenhall. I mean, listen, the list of marketing greats and Coca-Cola, goes together.
Even actually, use one example that is very close to my heart. Actually, outside specifically of marketing, it was for the overall business. And this was maybe back in 2008-9. We were going through a massive, big business challenge of a turnaround challenge in Thailand. There were different points of views around whether the strategy was right, it was delivering results or not, et cetera, et cetera. And at the very senior level of the company, I'm talking at the CEO level, there were different views up there. So a phenomenal leader that used to lead Coca-Cola by the name of Neville Isdell, he was the chairman and CEO of Coca-Cola, decided, okay, I'm going to take care of this one. I'll fly to you, Manolo, to to Thailand, to Bangkok, and we had there 2-3 days of sessions going through the plan, etc., etc. And it was very interesting because, this was a classical out of kind of business books, manuals on turnarounds. And, when you're coming from a negative or decreasing performance, before you go into double-digit explosive growth, you need to go from the -10 to -5 to -2 to flat to +2, etc., etc. So that turnaround is a very difficult period. And it's a very difficult period for most leaders because you are dealing with the tension between the short term and the long term, the need to deliver next quarter, next month, this year, versus the patience that it takes to basically build the capabilities that are required across the whole business to turn around a business. So I still remember Neville said, Manolo, you guys, after 3 days here, I'm very, very clear that you're going to be, you and the team, the whole team is going to be very successful. They are very early, incipient, very small, but clearly, small lights at the end of this tunnel. And this tunnel that you're going through is called the age of the dark nights. And in the age of the dark nights, some leaders, a lot of leaders, unfortunately, they don't have confidence in themselves. And they end up changing the strategy too frequently, almost every 2 or 3 months. The second type of leaders, they don't change the strategy, but what they change is key members of the team. Because they know they're getting through massive pressure and they get extra time by basically saying, well, I got the wrong person here and there. So I kind of renew my position for more time.
Yeah, I've seen it.
And there's a third type of leaders, those that kind of roll up their sleeves and having the confidence that the strategy is the right one. The team fundamentally is the same. It might not be perfect, but they're willing to roll up their sleeves and build the capabilities together and go through whatever it takes to learn every day and continue to encourage and inspire the teams to go faster. Ultimately, you need to decide which kind of leader you are or are you going to be. And that was one that has profoundly touched me because every time I've been very fortunate at Coke to have multiple big, let's say, turnaround or difficult businesses to deal with. And I've always applied that playbook. And fortunately, at least based on my experience, it works.
How do you communicate to your team that that's the path you're going to choose? Do you go to them and say, guys, we're not going to change the strategy. We've beaten it to death. I'm not going to change you all out. We're in this. How would you communicate that to them, or how have you communicated that to the team?
Well, you're going now into another phenomenal topic of, very close to my heart, which is about leadership. Ultimately, you need to also define what kind of leader you want to be. You want to basically go command and control, top down. I would define that as a very old-fashioned.
Mm-hmm.
You want to drive your team in the quest for speed through basically even fear. Or you want to go to the opposite side, which is through inspiration. You will never, ever get the level of engagement, the level of willingness to go the extra mile, the best ideas in an environment that is afraid, even if just 5 or 10% of fear, but just a bit of fear is never a good ground for creativity, for ideas, or for growth to flourish. The role of a leader is really to inspire. The role of a leader is to ensure that displays vulnerability. The role of a leader is one that manages by trust and by mutual respect. The role of a leader is to ensure that you don't have all the answers, that you're not supposed to know it all, but that you inspire the team to look and learn from the outside, to be continuously learning, to be continuously searching for better answers, for better solutions. That's the real role for a leader. So that's how I try to move my team forward.
Listen, I've gotten to know you here a little bit, and I sort of understood that already. I mean, I do think you're one of the, I don't know, few, but I don't hear you bring a lot of ego into sort of what you're doing. This is kind of the thematic of what you're talking about here and you're sharing. So I get that. But if you could, can you remember maybe some advice you've given to somebody on the team, especially maybe if it's in those moments of real difficulty? Do you remember you said, wow, that was the right thing to say at that moment? I mean, it's hard to get there. I don't know. I don't want to appeal to your ego on that because I don't think that's the kind of guy. So I'm trying to stay away from that. But there has to have been times you said, wow, that's the right thing to do with this team. Do you remember that experience?
I'm going to share with you two. One more, I will call it superficial, and the other one more profound. The more superficial is, I've seen teams that, when they go through hardship, through difficult times, and when they were coming from good times, successful, great performance times, I always tell them, guys, we are the same. We were not that smart when things were going really well, and we're not that stupid when things don't go well now. We are exactly the same.
I love that.
So, and that is a kind of an icebreaker where it makes everyone relax and say, you're right. We knew what to do to get this business moving to a great level of performance. And now we're going through a difficult time and we're just the same people. We're just humans, but we know we can solve any issue if we work together. So that's the more, let's say, basic, superficial. A more profound one, when you deal with incredible talent, that I'm fortunate to have a lot of incredible talent in my teams. At Coke, everyone, it's just formidable across all functions. A lot of people are, a lot of professionals are extremely driven. Night and day, weekends, 24/7, they can't stop. And Coca-Cola drives such a level of passion and pride for a lot of us that if you're not careful, you can easily lose grasp of the need to also take care of other very important things. So what I try to remember to my team, particularly in challenging times, I ask them to be selfish. And what that means is the following. Selfish is about you as an individual being priority number 1, number 2, and number 3. Priority number 1 is your sleep. Priority number 2 is your food, your diet. Priority number 3 is your exercise. If you take care of those 3 priorities first, you will be in the right state of mind and the right mindset to really drive phenomenal and give the best of you day in, day out at work.
Yeah.
And then priority 4, you can take care of other things, which obviously is family, it could be, it is work as well. Yeah. I think a lot of times we don't feel comfortable saying this because we are in a business environment. But, this whole notion of well-being and ensuring that you do the right thing for your mind, for your body, for your spirit first, it's really what is required to then perform at top level. It is very important.
It's a very big deal, Manolo. I think it's highly undervalued and underappreciated. Just even, I think in your first one there too, that's my experience. It's like sleep is critical. And by the way, if I'm not sleeping, it means something's going on and I need to find resolution to that. I need to understand, is there something gnawing at me? Is there something I'm not seeing? Is there something that I'm anxious about? Is there fear-based? What's happening internally? Because if I don't have sleep, that really cascades negative and it never ends up good. And then you end up days out. Yeah. I think the issue is that, it's funny you say that. I had somebody on my team ask me not too long ago, they said, how do you do what you do? Now, I'm a CEO of a small business with some very big senior executives, corporate executives, like yourself. I put in a lot of energy. I'm very passionate about what I get to do here too for this, thing he said. It takes a real effort, and it's everything you just said. I have to eat properly. I have to get exercise. I have to make sure I manage the relationships. It's all that balance. And if you get that right, then you really can be like a machine to walk through walls and get things done and make things happen. And to have a clarity of thinking too along the way, which I think is really important.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think a lot of people just totally undervalue how important it is. And I don't know about you, but I think I've spent a lifetime trying to get that right.
And that is a challenge definitely for some of us. And, when you're 20, 25, 30, you can get away with anything. You can sleep 5 hours per day max for a month, and you can keep on moving, but it's just not healthy. You are definitely not at your best. You think you are, but you're not. As you age, you start to appreciate how important is all of those components together.
Yeah. And you can do more than you think you can, but you have to be able to set up the system to do that right. You can't just blow through because it'll catch us sideways. What do CMOs get wrong? We'll find out what Manolo thinks in a minute. But first, let's take a quick break. Thanks for listening to Building Better CMOs. If you have a second, I'd like to ask a quick favor. Take your phone out and share this episode with someone else. It's all about making marketers better. You could text it to a coworker or a friend, easy. Or you can post it on LinkedIn and tell people why you liked it. There's one other thing that you can do to help building better CMOs, and that's to leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. There's a link to do it in the show notes. However you support us, I really appreciate it. Thank you. This is Greg Stuart. Now back to the show. This is Building Better CMOs. Let's get back to my conversation with Manolo from the Coca-Cola Company. Let's shift here. Let's go to the fun of building better CMOs. Okay. So the question that's coming. What do we think? It could be asked a couple of different ways. What do we think marketing or marketers don't fully understand or appreciate? What do they don't know? I get that every once in a while. What do you think that we don't spend enough time trying to figure out? What leaves a gap or a hole in our ability to operate effectively in the companies that we're in? Like any way you kind of want to approach that. But if, and listen, my organization, I'm a nonprofit here to make marketing CMO stronger. That is the point of the podcast. That is the point of the whole MMA and everything that we do. So the advice that you would have for marketing, or what's your input to what you think that you don't know if we appreciate it enough or spend enough time to figure out? Let you go on that for a little bit there.
I'll start with data, and there are multiple data points out there that you can find easily, whereby roughly, I'm just averaging all of them out, around 2/3 of the CMOs today feel or don't in reality have the full support and trust of their CEOs and or their boards of directors.
This data came out just recently. I saw it published again. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And, I happen maybe because of, the position I got quite a few peers that kind of reach out and say, hey, Mel, I'm going through some of this. How are you dealing with that? How did you dealt with that at the beginning of your journey? And, I think with the benefit of having spent more time out of marketing in operating roles as a GM or CEO of different parts of our business or in other companies, more time on doing that than actually marketing, it's up for the CMOs to change that. No one else is going to change that.
Yeah. So we need to own responsibility first.
Absolutely. It starts by looking yourself in the mirror.
Have to.
And start to really think about what would it take or would I need to change and do differently to really start to think as a CEO or as a director in a board. What are their drivers? What are their motivations? What they're expecting from marketing? And obviously part of the discussion is engaging with them and genuinely listening what they feel is the priority for the business. Now, out of that, what I can tell you is that a few observations. I have found quite a few CMOs that still have not had the experience and as an operator or as a COO or as a GM. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they struggle to understand the nuances that are requiring a full understanding of the P&L or the balance sheet or the cash flow limitations of any given corporation. And that is an initial point of contention that it starts to derail the whole thing. And that's definitely one component. So deep financial acumen is a starting point. That's one. The second point I've also found as a pattern is that, there's already a perception out there, whether we like it or not, about CMOs by other functions, CEOs, and boards of directors. And That perception is a lot of times we try to drive in marketing our own agenda that is not 100% compatible with the agenda of the large corporations. So my invitation for CMO would be just make sure that you really start to think cross-enterprise. Your priority is to drive a cross-enterprise thinking way before you drive your own function, i.e. marketing, specific objectives. And to the degree that you lead by example, that everyone, your peers in the management committee, see that you put ahead the agenda of the corporation, of the company, way ahead of your own individual agenda in marketing, that will go a long way. And that requires a lot of paradigm shift. It is normal and natural, like in any other profession, that the strong, solid CMOs have strong opinions, strong points of views. But with the strong opinions and strong point of views, in my experience, you always bring also paradigms. You also bring a degree of convictions that are absolute truths. And I've learned through my experience that there's nothing absolute in business. It's not black or white. There's all gray and all the degrees of gray. So a lot of times, I think the secret to really be an effective CMO is to move from a know-it-all mindset and ensure that the whole marketing organization moves out of that mindset of I know it all to I learn it all, to really be driven by curiosity, be driven by the need to learn and be connected to the consumer and to the outer world on a daily basis. That is what is the first step to get you into a successful place. For us at Coke, the way we have defined the role for marketing is really about driving growth. Our main role in the corporation is to ensure that we support the business leaders, the CEOs and COOs of the different parts of the world, to be very successfully increasing in driving growth, both top line and bottom line. And as our purpose says, it's also about making a difference and giving back to communities and making a difference around important topics like diversity. So it's not either or. You got to drive both. And actually, everything comes under the umbrella of growth. That's basically the way I would invite you guys to think about growth. That way, at least in my own experience at Coke, we've found we are right now in a fascinating moment of our history whereby marketing is definitely, again, sitting at the top of the table, driving the agenda, the growth agenda of the company with tremendous credibility with the rest of the functions in the company, with our bottling partners around the world. And by no means we're done, and we are even half of the way or the pathway we should be. But we're definitely off to, we live in a very, very inspiring moment for everyone that works in marketing at Coke.
Do you think if we were to talk to the other marketers, do they really understand that marketing is about growth? Have they adopted that as their sort of in part mantra, their North Star? Do you think they all get it, or do you think we still even have work to do, even within Coca-Cola, to do that?
Oh, yeah.
Like I hear you get it, which is unusual, by the way.
For me, obviously in a very diverse organization, we have more than 2,000 marketeers. You have, again, all the degrees of gray. Some people some professionals, they are only driven by their own individual passions. And some of them have tremendous passion for only one or some components of the marketing spectrum. But I think what definitely has helped to galvanize everyone in the marketing community in Coke is the existence or a transformation driven by metrics.
Okay. I've heard that there. Yeah.
Because metrics do matter. And we're driving basically, there are multiple, but there's one over and above the rest. And it's one single metric. And everyone knows that that's what we're looking for. And anything that is not aligned with that metric, it will be a very, very hard sell because it's not going to really add meaningful value to our business.
By the way, I have heard that. So I was in Vietnam last year for MMA, and I met with the Coca-Cola executives there, and that's what they talked about. And I know your team in APAC is trying to rethink sort of how you do measurement, which we've tried to be supportive of. So it's funny you say that. I do hear that very clearly. You know, Manolo, what you're saying is interesting. I tell this story a lot. I've told it here, so apologies to the readers. But I had a closed-door meeting with a bunch of CMOs as the MMA was becoming a CMO organization about 7 years ago, just about the time I got working with Omar. In fact, Omar was in the room with me. Just to set the stage, CMO of General Motors, T-Mobile, Chobani, Allstate, Duncan, big CMOs, right? All in the room, closed door. And Omar threw out a warm-up question, 10 minutes, just supposed to be 10 minutes, just to get us going, right? Wasn't even what we were there to talk about. He said, what is the role of marketing? What's the role of CMO? You can guess what happened, Manolo. 1 hour later, we realized nobody in the room agreed. Not one person had the similar vision. So if we're not consistent in what we think we're about, and I do believe the answer is growth, that needs to be our singular first answer. If we're not clear, how do we expect the boards, the CFOs, the CEOs to appreciate what we're doing if we're not aligned at some very basic level set? I think that's where we're lost a little bit as a function. Yeah.
Correct. And I think, if you really think about growth is the fuel of any organization. When there's no growth, you know what's going to happen next.
People aren't getting their bonuses is one thing that's going to happen.
That's only one, but then restructurings and all that kind of stuff. But when you are single-minded focused on driving and accelerating growth, even if you're doing really well, 2x, 3x, whatever is your current momentum, and you align everyone towards that, then the role that marketing plays will fall in its natural place for everyone.
Marketing goes to the head of the class in leading the company, back to your earlier point about leadership, when we focus on growth, because we're the one group that does have some input and real control and budgets to support that typically. I know it's not enough. That's a whole different story. But if we don't align there, I totally agree. Very interesting. I don't know if I've heard anybody be so crystal clear about that. So you have the unique experience of having been, how many countries have you worked in for Coca-Cola? Give me a number.
Living for years, 5 for Coke.
Okay.
1 outside of Coke. But that's living, yeah.
And that's a business leader role, which means you're in there as a general, I don't know what title they give it, general manager. You're running the P&L. And listen, it's a very marketing predominant sort of, part of your day, I'm sure even still. But you're still a business leader thinking about P&L and teams and resources to manage up. So you have a unique experience. Not every marketer gets that. In fact, Coke has done that a couple of times now. They have taken country leaders and made them CMO, haven't they? They've done that a couple of times, I think I've seen.
Correct. It's happened before, at least that I know, 3 or 4 times in our history.
It used to be that Coke brought marketers up to be CMOs, but now they've changed the dynamics. Okay, so obviously the company, you're falling in line with that thematic, where they're going. I guess the question I have for that, so I don't know, what's the question to ask you? Like, what advice do you have for CMOs who don't have that? How do you get aligned with the CFO? How do you learn to talk their language? Do you have any advice for somebody who didn't have the experience you've had, or go get it? I don't think that's your advice.
Well, if you don't have it, you're going to need to go and get it for sure, okay? But that doesn't mean necessarily changing the role. But what I can tell you is what I did in my first week. So the first thing I did in my job, I don't remember if it was day 1 or day 2, but it was not more than that, is the CFO of the company and myself, we went for lunch. We had a phenomenal time exchanging views, perspectives about the work that we needed to do together over the coming years. And that lunch continued with the meeting the rest of the afternoon. And we committed to each other that we owe to our great company making sure that the marketing and the finance function would work at the level of collaboration and closeness together never seen before. And I think when the leaders of the rest of the organization see the leaders doing, behaving, and acting in that way, everyone follows. A lot of the great successes that we're seeing now today, almost 5 years later, they started because of that commitment, that mutual commitment, which is still, actually, I was a little bit late into this call because of another great session with John, with our CFO. It's so important. I can't underscore how critical it is, because if you want to know, if you want to estimate, if you have an idea, at least a range, if you don't have an exact number, of how much value we create in our roles for a corporation, there's no better partner to help you put a dimension to that than your CFO.
Yeah, listen, she or he has the access to, the treasury at some level.
Exactly.
I'm kind of overusing those terms not properly, exactly right. But they have access to the treasury. Their job is to look for places to investment. We tell a story internally a lot because we've done a lot of work with Omar and others around this, and some other work that we're doing about how the CMO talks to the CFO. We have a story, you're going to love this. It's called carpeting, not marketing. Let me explain what that means. We happen to have a bank executive on the board who 1 year lost $100 million in marketing money because the operations people at the bank, at the branches, in charge of the branches, had figured out the return on investment of installing new carpeting. So marketing lost to carpeting. Carpeting was a better return on investment than marketing. That's very sad. No, that's very sad. We tell that as kind of like, this is our bottom story. This is where we don't want to get to.
It can get worse than that.
It can get worse than that. So, okay, but hey, go back. Listen, this is a hard question. Obviously, no proprietary information. But are you able to illustrate in any way sort of the conversation you would have and using some of the terms that the CFO does, what, cash flow and sort of what to do with excess cash? Some of those, how do you tune what you're doing? We tend to talk in like likes and viewable impressions and silly stuff that doesn't matter to anybody but us. So how do you switch that conversation with a CFO?
There are multiple dimensions in which that comes to life.
That's a very open-ended question. So just, riff on that, I think, for people a little bit, right?
I come from a place that might not be that popular for other CMOs. Let me give you an example. I've seen a good 3/4 of marketeers, regardless of their level, their training, or their origin, where they come from in terms from other companies, that they come with an ongoing position that the amount of marketing dollars that they have is insufficient. And therefore, I need more marketing. Leaving aside the amount of marketing that we have at Coke, which is obviously, it's not public, but it's a sizable budget. I can take two approaches. And these are real approaches, okay? And they are available to me. If I benchmark our level of marketing to most other companies out there, anyone would say, there's nothing. It's not enough. I can't do a proper marketing given the size and the scale of this business with that amount of dollars. There's a separate way of looking into that, which is the fact that, for example, like many other big companies, as you probably know and are aware, and it's public data out there, the level of full viewability of digital marketing investments, digital media investments, hardly reaches 55%.
Mm-hmm.
So should I go and ask for more marketing dollars, knowing that half of those dollars are going to be basically paid, but not fully viewed by my intended target? Let me make it even more complex. If we know, and you probably were a big part of that many years ago, that the variable of quality messaging versus quantity can be, depending on the segment, the category, the market, but anywhere between 7 to 8 times more important than the dollars. If you get the right messaging, if you hit on the nail that drives the conversion of a non-consumer into loving and consuming your product, that is worth 7 to 8 times in dollars.
Can be, absolutely.
If you are a business leader as opposed to just a CMO, why wouldn't you focus first in getting your quality levels? And I know it's not something that you can guarantee to go from a 3 to a 6 or a 7. But the easier way is to just go to the CEO or the CFO and say, I got inflation in media of 10%. Therefore, I need 10% more dollars. Like, no. And you obviously find great CMOs out there that understand this intimately. But I find many more marketeers that have less interest in driving that, because that involves putting for yourself goals that are more stretched. It is more difficult to guarantee and condition your annual incentive to significantly increasing the quality of your marketing or changing or understanding what do you need to change in the digital supply chain so your full viability is different. Those are examples of, just a few examples of some of the conversations where we've had at Coke for not only for today or recently, but for years.
I had one of the CMOs on one of the episodes here had run a thesis. They had a background as a chemical engineer. Funny background, but a science background. Okay. She goes, I find so many marketers start with, how big a budget I have and how big is my team, rather than what's the hypothesis we're trying to prove and how well can we measure that hypothesis to success. That's what a science person does versus something else. Yeah, isn't that smart? I thought that was really good. It was very, I'd not heard that a lot. It really caught my attention when I did. So listen, I heard the tension between long and short about 4 or 5 years ago, right? How do we do that? And basically what the question was, what is the value of brand? But we said, no, what if brand had to be performance? Because it does need to be over time. Over time, brand needs to produce sales results, correct? Do we agree with that as a thesis?
That's my starting premise. I don't separate brand and performance. That is something I've heard across the industry, but I really struggle to say there's some marketing dollars that drive performance and there's some marketing dollars that drive brand. It's like, what are you talking about? I don't get that.
Okay, so our study series is called Brand as Performance. Okay, so I think I've stitched back to where you were. Okay. So what was interesting about that question is, first off, there is no methodology to measure the long-term sales impact of brand. Manolo, that's crazy. Our business is 150 years old and there have been no method. And by the way, I've asked that question now 200-300 CMOs and nobody's come up with an actual methodology. So we built one and we've now been doing a series of studies. Campbell's, AT&T, we've not come out with yet, Kroger's, Ally. So we're starting to get a body of information that against this methodology, we can measure the long-term sales impact of brand, how it converts to favorables for one, and then how favorables often convert to sales. Do you think has Coke enough clarity at this point about what is the sales impact of brand over some period of time? Or do you think you could use that information to greater value? Or here's an interesting one. Do you think you'd have an idea of what it would show us about brand versus short-term sales, typically short-term performance buying media strategies? Too many questions?
No. I understand the questions, and it's actually a topic that big, very close to my heart. I love it. As opposed to direct-to-consumer businesses, every CPG, as you mentioned before, has been in this journey now for decades to really understand or to really get to a model or a series of models that would allow to really measure specifically the value coming from marketing, both short and long term. I think we at Coke, like many other companies, many other CPGs, have had decades of experience working with MBA modeling, etc. I still remember at some...
Yeah, MMM would give you a sense of that, right?
Right. At some point of history, I remember we were getting with 160 different models, trying to measure every single variable, controllable or non-controllable, that could impact our business. I think in our case, our experience is that back then, when we were doing that more than a decade ago, the computing power, the resources required, the level of or the lack of an existence of AI, and a very different media engagement scenario, which was, as you know, almost not 100%, but almost close to 100. Traditional TV led to a place that it was very challenging. We had good approximation at macro level, not at micro, but a macro top-line view of roughly the impact in the long term versus the short term of different options of investment in marketing. The challenge back then, that is still the case today, is that no one had understood or had been able to quantify the multiplier effects or the divider effects between any of those 160 variables, because it is different. The multiplier effects will be different if you take in combinations of 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, so on, up until n equal to 160. The same thing for divider effects. And any campaign, any marketing program, even for the same brand, just the next month can have multiplier and or divider effects. And you don't really know, because the quality component of the content can dramatically transform from positive to negative or the other way around. What is different today is a combination of the world having moved to a digital-first, digital marketing engagement model primarily. Second, that level of computing power. Third, the fact that AI methodologies will allow you to digest, process, consolidate data at a whole different unprecedented speed. And then the ability to combine first, second, and third-party data. And I think for the most part, down to almost, I would say, the case, because it's still, today a lot of companies have some degree of modeling and projections that distinguish short versus long term. But down to the transaction, at the individual transaction level, it will still take a few years, not many though, to get there. I think we are going to be very, very close to see something that really involves a revolution in the science of marketing moving forward.
I love that. There's so many naysayers that say, oh, it's just getting worse. But no, I think there's hope on the horizon. I think I agree with you. What's interesting, I heard a data point that really concerns. So listen, I'm a big fan of multi-touch attribution. I helped co-create that methodology back in the early 2000s with a guy named Rex Briggs. And what was interesting, I checked in with him recently, who's now sold off his company, so he has no dog in the fight. And I said, so where are we? Marketers adopted MTA, and it's about 50% of marketers have that, which MMA thinks is the answer. Okay, here's what's interesting. I says, what do you think is the biggest challenge with it? He said, I believe my teams tell me that only 10% of our clients are actually executing against the MTA work that they had. So even when they start to get the data, whether we believe it or not, there's a secondary issue about quality. It's linkage to sales. There's a lot of complexity to be resolved. It can happen in this environment. We still don't get the information fast enough. What you just said is maybe we will get the information fast enough and better quality. That's a very inspirational point.
I still remember a time in which the experts were trying to combine all of these models, and we didn't have enough amount of memory in the computers to be able to deal with all of that. So you would need to go at a different speed. You would get the data 2 or 3 months after, when it was too late to react.
Too late. It's good learning, but not helpful in the broad scheme of the world and optimizing. Yeah.
That is changing as we speak very quickly.
Yeah, we're actually doing a bunch of experiments now too with machine learning, AI personalization, or personalization of creative, I'd say, using AI machine learning. In that case, the machine is making decisions far faster than a human being could even come close to, and reacting to it and then finding a proportion of it that makes sense, which is, I think, one of the hopes of sort of AI. Hey, listen, Manolo, this has really been incredible. I can't tell you how enlightening this is for me to hear. I don't have a finance background, but I believe in everything you just said. And I do think that is the answer, that we need to start acting as business I want to be careful because I want to denigrate the work that's come before, because you're right, that X factor comes from someplace else. But talking the language of business, just more, we've got to put it back in those terms. And I think I mentioned that the board asked the MMA to work on that. And we think we have the answer. We think we do, and we're going through a testing scenario. By the end of this quarter, we should have more insight to that. So listen, I didn't mention it earlier. I'm going to close with this, though, is that I'm going to thank you and Coca-Cola again. Listeners won't know, but the MMA was really built on the backs of Coca-Cola. In fact, there was a Coca-Cola marketing executive who was the chair of the organization back in its early days in 2007, I think is what it was. And Coke gave a lot of support to the MMA over a lot of years. And, we as an organization wouldn't be who we are if it hadn't been for Coke stepping in at those pivotal moments and really helping us to get to this point. And now we're going to go fix marketing. So hopefully we pay it all back. I guess, is that the idea? I don't know.
Awesome.
Manolo, you're the best.
Thank you, Greg. It's really a pleasure.
Thanks again to Manolo Arroyo from the Coca-Cola Company for coming on Building Better CMOs. Check out the description of this episode for links to connect with Manolo. If you want to know more about MMA's work to unlock the power of marketing, visit MMAglobal.com. Or you can attend any one of our 44 conferences in the 16 countries where MMA operates. Or just write me, Greg, MMAglobal.com. Now, thank you so much for listening. Tap the link in the description to leave us a review. And if you're new to the show, please follow or subscribe on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, iHeart, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can find links to all those places and more at bettercmos.com. Our producer and podcast consultant is Eric Johnson from lightningpod.fm. Artwork is by Jason Chase. Special thanks to Angela Gray and Dan Whiting for making this happen. This is Greg Stewart. I'll see you in 2 weeks.